Processes and tools dominate today's Agile discussions, but we are devoted to the individuals and interactions that make it work. From the beginner to the veteran practitioner, we have something for you. Welcome to Agile for Humans.
Welcome to this week's episode of Agile for Humans. I'm your host, Ryan Ripley. We bring amazing Agilists together to share their ideas about agility in today's fast-paced world. We examine current Agile tips and practices with the goal of helping you become an Agile leader in your organization. Please be sure to rate us and review us on iTunes, like us on Facebook, and subscribe on Patreon at ryanripley.com. Thank you, as always, for supporting the show. In exchange for supporting this program, we can continue to bring you great guests and insights from the Agile community. With multiple subscriber levels, you can help make this show even better. We are always taking your questions and comments about the show via email, ryan@ryanripley.com, or on the ryanripley.com website. Leave us a comment in the post, and we'll be sure to answer it on the next show. Joining me today are Don McGreal and Ralph Jocham. These two guys have just finished writing a book on product ownership. It should be released here a little bit before this podcast goes live. We'll have links to all that in the show notes, but really wanted to get Don and Ralph together so we could talk about the book-making process, kind of how that process works, and even product ownership, the dark arts behind this mysterious role that seems to cause many Agile teams confusion and trouble. So Ralph and Don, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you for having us.
First and foremost, just want to say congratulations on the book. Being in the middle of working on one myself, I completely understand the toil, misery, and pain you go through trying to put one of these together. And just a huge congratulations to you guys. It's a major accomplishment.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, it was about a year and a half, 2 years, I guess, total. But it wasn't. I kind of enjoyed it. I liked working with Ralph all that time, and we really got to know each other well.
Yeah, it was a great experience, and with all the ups and downs going through that, sometimes you kind of think, oh God, what did I get myself into it? But at the very end, once you have it, you're really proud of what you did, and it was a really good experience also to work together with Don and learn from him and put all of our ideas together.
So this book it's the professional product owner leveraging Scrum as a competitive advantage. What can you tell us about the book as far as the focus, the center, the underlying message? What have you tried to bring forward to the community as this book hits the shelves?
Well, I think the title is important. I mean, we went back and forth on the title quite a bit. It's really about being a professional product owner. We toil with maybe product manager even, but it's about the product owner being number one, and then seeing Scrum not as some project management tool, but as a competitive advantage for your product, for your company, for your organization. So we really tried to bring that out in the book, and we really wanted to turn upside down this traditional way of thinking of a product owner as somebody that writes a bunch of user stories and has to get into details to something a lot more strategic.
And what Don just mentions about strategic, but we also kind of building on top of the strategy as you should kind of, a clear vision as a product owner and putting that into a strategy. Also kind of really get in the focus on value, getting away from this project thinking to a product mindset in order to really generate value, go out there and, have happy customers.
So you guys use the word professional in the title, and also as being a part of Scrum.org, professionalism it permeates through all of our training offerings and all of our courses and our philosophy. But there may be some listeners out there kind of scratching their heads saying, well, what's the difference between a traditional product owner and a professional product owner? Don, can you shed some light on, and maybe Ralph can help as well, the word professional and professionalism, and how you see that really enhancing the role of the product owner?
Yeah, as well as professional Scrum trainers, Ralph and I have been talking about this for a while, where the issue right now we have in our industry is we take kids right out of college and say, hey, you took an HTML class in college, here's a multi-million-dollar project to work on. And it's unlike any other industry out there where we just throw people at problems and there's no real apprenticeship, there's no craftsmanship, there's no professionalism in our industry. And you might even assert that software is not a profession at this point. So a lot of that rings throughout all the training in Scrum.org, because their mission is improve the profession of software delivery. And we talk about professional Scrum Masters, professional Scrum developers, and then professional Scrum product owners. And where we see this, when it comes specifically to product owners, is don't just see it as a job where you're fielding, you're receiving lots of requirements from customers, from management, and you're just now handing them off to a team. A true professional product owner is one that initiates these things, thinks about their customers, thinks about value to the customer, to their customer, and also to their organization, and starts to think: is this how I would spend my money every sprint? Am I getting the right return on investment? Am I getting enough value out of this? That's a professional in our world, and how we like to talk about them in the book.
So to build on top of what Don just said, so we go so far as we try to, we call it the entrepreneurial mindset. So we want that the product owner thinks and acts like an entrepreneur. And we strongly believe that it's even possible, because sometimes people in our training say, but I work for a large enterprise. I can't be an entrepreneur. Maybe not in a technical sense like having your own startup, but you could still have the entrepreneurial mindset, and network, talk to people, things going. Don't take no as an answer and just keep on, struggling day in, day out in order to really get the best possible product out there.
So as trainers and as coaches and consultants, I know the three of us see a lot of different organizations. We see a lot of different scenarios. Through your time as product owners and as trainers and as coaches and consultants, what are some of the craziest anti-patterns or some of the biggest problems that you're seeing in that product owner space that you're hoping that this book helps solve? And maybe we can start with Ralph on this one.
Okay. So most companies still think in projects. And I think that's a big problem, because a project essentially turns everything around, because before you can start a project, you have to tell how much, scope, schedule, budget. And then as a good project manager, you deliver on scope, on time, on budget. Whether you deliver the right thing, that could actually be a secondary thought. So we want first to get out of this project mindset to a product mindset. Basically, you deliver a product to a customer, providing value, making this customer happy. And by this, getting good positive feedback, and people talk good about the product. And so therefore, more people buy it and the revenue goes up, and everybody is happy. So this is kind of where we want to get people to think about products. And then the other thing is that often what we see is that even though they have a product owner, it's often just a tiny component within a company. So you have product owners for this service, product owners for that tiny bit. And then you have to coordinate all of that. So the question is really, what is your product? And you have to think hard about that. And usually what I think is that people go too low with their products. You have to go as high as possible. You shouldn't go too high, but let's say let's talk about an insurance company I was recently with. It's a whole insurance company providing life insurance, car insurance, all kinds of different insurances. And we came up with, at the end, we probably need about 10 to 12 product owners for the whole insurance. And this gives you an idea about how we want to scale actually product ownership up.
John, how about you?
Yeah, some of the things that I see over and over and over again are one of the things we hit on a lot. We hit it in the book, but also in our classes is product owners not being strategic enough, thinking more as we use the term scribes or like secretaries for the teams. I've had people in my classes say things like, sometimes I just feel I'm their secretary, or I go to these meetings with the customer and development teams are saying things like, hey, this is important. You should probably write this down. And they're just jotting things down for the team. They're getting more details. We really aim to change that, to make them more strategic, is insofar as, even saying that they're not even responsible for writing the stories. Get help for that. We want you to think about these things more strategically, and get the people on the team helping out with this stuff. Get help. And the other thing I see a lot. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, but it's just I was teaching a class in Berlin a couple of months back, and a product owner training. And I go, yes, I'm a product owner. I just said, great. So tell me a little about it. Yeah, I'm the product owner for testing. And this kind of really took me over, because, I mean, how can you be product owner for a thing you need to do, but it's not really a product? So sometimes it is really heavily misunderstood what product ownership really means.
Yeah. Yeah, and actually another interesting point here, and is in our book we try to define what a product is, because sometimes they don't even know what a product is. A lot of these big organizations don't know what their products are. It's a little bit easier when you're a software product company and you've got a series of products that you're supporting. But when you're just one system out of many that hands off, like their component teams working on like back end systems, sometimes it's very hard to determine what your products are. And one of the areas what we focus on is basically we make an assertion. If you're working on something, if you have a customer, then you have a product. If you can determine who the buyer is and who's actually using it, there's a consumer and there's a buyer in terms of customers, then there is a product that exists. Then the question needs to be, though, is it a viable product? So even in the case that Ralph mentioned, like I'm the product owner of testing. Could testing be its own product? Well, I would ask first, who's paying for the testing? What's the value proposition of this separate testing group? Is it to increase quality? Well, then let's measure that to see if we're going to be improving that. And then who's the consumer? Who's actually benefiting from this? Who's using the testing? Is it the other teams? Do they want this? Is this something that they're even asking for? So in that sense, I kind of look at everything as a product, even that. Just the question then is it a viable product? Is it actually going to give you the return on your investment that you think it will by having a separate testing group or a separate automation group? And in my experience, and I think what Ralph is alluding to as well, is that doesn't exist. We've seen it over and over again in our industry.
Well, and what I hear in that conversation there is we're validating assumptions almost all the time. Is that a fair way to put it? Or maybe exactly. Even a better term. Yeah. Maybe even a better term is validated learnings. Like we have these ideas, but now we learn something, and now we know that we learned it, and perhaps far too often that's not happening in organizations.
And the competitive advantage that Scrum provides a product owner is a way to validate their hypotheses. We're building complex things. So maybe the hypothesis is that if we had a separate testing group that you handed things off to, the hypothesis is that quality would improve. All right, well, let's prove it. Let's see what happens. Let's start measuring that. What's an experiment we could try? Could we do this for a little while? How much are we willing to spend on it? Let's see this actually work. And even in that sense, you could see a product.
So also in the book, there's something we came up with, and we call it the 3 V's. So we think that every product owner should have a clear vision about what they want to achieve. And this can be really a high stretch goal, which you might actually not be even able to achieve within the next couple of months, maybe even years, but it's a good vision, and then you do everything towards that vision. And because of what you deliver, you also want to deliver the value to the users in the context of the vision. And then once you have it delivered, you need to validate whether, and this is also what Don was just kind of addressing, so validate whether you have delivered the value. So vision, value, validation. And this is also something we really stretch heavily and go into detail throughout the book, how you can come up with a vision, how you can, try to come up with the value, what it means for the end users, and practices how to validate it.
We have a chapter for each of the V's in the book, and there's a lot of practical ways of achieving them too.
I actually had the opportunity, Don, to take your course a few months ago. I think we were down in Plano for that. And I was really, something that still I've been thinking about a lot lately is around vision. You do this really great discussion in your professional Scrum product owner course around vision, and especially what happens when there is no vision. And what I have found in organizations, especially relating back to some of the previous conversations we've had about companies not knowing what their product is or if they have a product, that lack of vision is really damaging to teams. Do you mind going into just a little bit of that vacuum that happens and just that lack of vision and how damaging that could be?
Yeah. So the way we kind of introduce the 3 Vs is to talk about a vacuum. There's a vacuum between the direction your organization is going, and then what your teams are doing day in and day out, sprint after sprint, what they're working on. And if you're not careful, that vacuum will get filled with something. Generally, in a project-minded organization, they fill it with project charters and Gantt charts and milestones and reports. The vision gets lost. It gets obfuscated by the time it gets to the people that doing the work. So we put it all on the product owner. Your job is to fill that vacuum, and you fill it with the 3 Vs. Your job is to, just like an executive would for an organization, you are the executive of the product. Your job is to establish a vision if there isn't one. If there is one, then your job is to communicate it, make sure everybody understands it, to maybe measure success in terms of value, to communicate what success looks like and how we're going to know when we get there. And then to validate, to make sure that, even your best hypothesis may be wrong. So how do we adjust as we go? Now, the better you do with that, the better you can communicate all the way down from vision. The more engaged your team members are going to be. So this is just going to make your life easier as a product owner, because you're going to see a much more motivated team. Your DBA, when they go home and they meet friends, they're not going to say they do database work during the day. I want them saying they save lives, or they get their customers home earlier for dinner with their families, or I want them really connected to why we're building these products. That everything we do in Scrum, we should be showing it to somebody whose lives we're improving. And that's got to be very clear. Otherwise, why are we bothering with any of this? Somebody somewhere his life is getting better because of the work we're doing every sprint. And product owners are responsible for making that clear. I'm not sure if that's exactly what I said in the class, but it's somewhere along those lines.
No, it's definitely along those lines, and it's just something it's that vacuum that really stuck with me. That if the product owner is not intentionally setting that vision day in and day out, and intentionally showing the impact of the product on the lives of the customers, everything else just swoops in and fills that up. Whether it's developers deciding what to build next, or gold plating, or Gantt charts, or charters, or 1,000-page requirement documents, and that really did stick out, and it's a really awesome part of the first V. The second V, Ralph, is value, and I know in my professional Scrum Master courses, even in the PSM, I get questions about value, and so when you get hit with the question, what is value? How do you find value? How do you define value? I know that the book is almost 400 pages long, and I'm sure a lot of it is about answering that question. But more concisely, Ralph, how do you address the question of value, and how would you recommend people explore what value means to them in their context?
So value is kind of like a very generic, very broad term, which I think is great about it, but it's also a little bit sometimes confusing for people. So value is like what's beautiful, and I think it really it exists in the eye of the beholder. So something which could be valuable for somebody else is not valuable for somebody different, and so on. So I think as a product owner, you when you get this idea about the company strategy, where they want to go, and the idea, the product vision you have, it's really then how you get from this point of view into what's of value. And for this, it's really going out there, talking to users, other stakeholders, everybody who has a say in this product or is interested in this product to understand what they really need, and then come up with some, we also talk about canvases in the training, like the lean canvas or the business model canvas. And in there, they talk about value proposition. So what do we propose? Which problems do we solve? And it's not really about the what yet. It's really about what problems are we going to change? What are we going, in which way are we improving people's life, in the same way Don talked about it before. And then once you have this idea, you can try to turn it into items you put into your product backlog, and then you implement them within a sprint. And in a sprint review, that's a first instance for you where you can show it to stakeholders and collect some initial feedback. Even better if you're really done and you can make a release and see, hey, we had this hypothesis, we had this idea about this feature could do this or that. And once you release that, you can see whether the value actually happened. If people started using it, if you get positive feedback, all of those things.
Yeah, and a lot of it then comes down to, and what you'll see where we get into metrics is going to be in that value chapter. So it's just really coming down to, we try to make it both strategic but also practical, right? Things that you can actually measure and do to show value. And one of the goals is there's always ways of gaming metrics, and it's sort of a hot topic in the Agile community about what are good metrics versus bad metrics, and how you measure value. But at the very least, what I like using these for is to give people something else to look at other than the typical metrics that we tend to equate to value. Obviously the project-minded ones is like scope, budget, and time, does not equate to value. These are inside metrics that we use to manage our day decisions, and velocity is certainly one that's along those lines. So just to give something else shiny to look at, we like to talk a lot about these other types of metrics that equate to value, like time to market or innovation, so that we understand where we're going from a product standpoint and how we know when we get there.
Well, and that leads into the final V of validation, and that's more of an intentional practice. That feels like something that if you're not planning for up front, you're going to have difficulties measuring on the back end. What are some of the tips that you guys have for ensuring that validation is a part of a product owner's daily practice or regular practice?
Yeah, so we were talking about there's two main ways to validate. One is internally with your experts. So the key tip there is, and this is what Scrum comes out of the box with this, is if you're doing Scrum properly, you have a potentially shippable increment every single sprint. So let's make use of that. Let's get people looking at this, using it, touching it, and getting feedback from that, and immediately applying that into the backlog. So getting the mindset of we don't know exactly what we're building until we validate it. But even your smartest people in the world aren't going to know exactly what this thing is supposed to be until we test it against the marketplace. So you've got the internal expert validation, but we want our product owners constantly thinking about what is their minimum viable product in order to actually ship. So we get into more on this idea of functional releases, or continuous delivery of shipping value as much as possible, but not just to get value back in terms of the return on investment, but also to understand if we're building the right thing, then what does the marketplace actually say about what it is we're building, which can give us the next best thing to build, allow us pivot opportunities going forward.
And one of the other things which we also really stress clearly in the book is the importance of having a release, because the only way you can actually ship value, and I just said it, is by shipping product, by releasing product. And if you only release once or twice a year, you only have once and twice a year a chance to validate your assumptions. So if you do frequent releases, you have, and this is really everything about the empirical process control, you have much more possibilities to validate your assumption whether you're on the right track or not.
Yeah, I think that's just one of the more important points, right? The point of Scrum is done, and getting to a releasable increment and getting that increment into the world and getting that feedback. I mean, that's really why you take on the overhead of practicing Scrum. And so I think that's I love the fact that you guys really highlight validation as being critical, because without, as you both mentioned, without the product out in the world, we have no idea if it's valuable, useful, or helping people and improving their lives. So I love that focus, and I think the 3 V's really encapsulate that idea of professionalism that we started the conversation with. It's a clear vision, well understood value, and then validating all of the things that we've assumed up to even the question of value, so that we have clear data. It's almost like it's based on empiricism or something, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I've been on way too many projects where we're working towards something and everybody's just too afraid to release it, and we go 6 months to a year working on this thing, and we're tapping ourselves on the back for using Scrum and building something that could go to production and getting feedback against our experts, thinking they know what's going on, and then releasing it and finding out that half the features are not even used. I've been on some pretty high profile projects like that where we spent months of lost revenue working on this, on a product that could make $10 million a month.
So one of the
working
other
on
things
things that nobody was even using.
Sorry, I'm in a hotel right now in Athens, and it looks like my internet is a little bit dodgy right now. But so one of the things I also kind of stress also in the trainings, and it's about the difference between having really something of value delivered, validated, or making progress. Because you just mentioned it also, Ryan, about being done at the end of the sprint. Too many companies that just say, this isn't working, that's not working. Let's just move on. Let's make progress. And I always say progress is great, and it could mean a lot, but it also could mean nothing. And so I also bring as an example, I'm German, with the airport in Berlin, which was supposed to open in 2012 it was. Now it's 2018, so 6 years ago. And this thing is still not running. This is still not operational. And right now it looks like 2021. So for over 6 years now, more than planned, they're still making progress, and they're making progress for the next 3 years. But there's no usable product. So progress, again, could mean nothing.
I once had a boss who you would ask teams of people, are you looking busy right now, or are you actually making money? And I always thought that was an interesting way to put it. It's you can walk around like the old the Dilbert character with the papers in hands, walking quickly, looking busy, or you can actually get value and results. And I that's always stood out to me, and I think it's a big highlight, I think, of what we've discussed here. Something else that I wanted to kind of shift into, what's really interesting about this whole professional series that Scrum.org is doing is that both Don and Ralph, you're both the stewards of the professional Scrum product owner course through Scrum.org. And what that means is that Don and Ralph work with Ken Schwaber and the rest of the PST, the professional Scrum trainer community, to build these training classes. And so not only are you getting, I think I read on the blurb, over 40 years combined experience from two really excellent product owners, but both Don and Ralph are the stewards of the course that thousands of people have taken through Scrum.org to learn how to be product owners. How has that influenced the way that you approach this book, and how you're explaining all of the things that like the 3 V's and all these other great insights? How has that really influenced and really helped shape this book?
Well, I think it, in my opinion, is Ralph. I don't know if he agrees with it, but it's the reason for the book. We've got a lot of passion around this, and the whole. Give you a little bit of history on that. The whole reason the stewardship program exists the way it does today is that there was a conference. I think it was Agile 2015. Is that right, Ralph, in Washington D.C.?
That's right. Yeah, it was Washington D.C. Yeah.
We were both there, and us and there was like 3 or 4 other product owner trainers sitting at the bar one night early on. I think it was like the first night of the conference, and we were talking a little bit about these things and saying, this product ownership is a big issue in the Agile world, and I'm not sure if the current professional product owner course addresses it. What are some things we'd like to see different? How do we make it a little bit more about strategy than tactics, and to cover these sorts of things that we're talking about? Lean Startup was starting to get popular back then, and that book by Eric Ries, and so how do we incorporate a lot of these ideas into it? And a few of us got pretty excited about it, and we just said, let's just start doing it. Let's just start building this thing, and then we'll put it out there, and then we'll ask Ken Schwaber and the others at Scrum.org about, hey, what do you think of this? Here's our proposal. Rather than constantly sending emails about things that should be done, why don't we just go do it? So a few of us, Ralph and I, and there were some other trainers too that came in and out, But, Ralph and I think we skipped most of that conference. Just we got so energized about just sitting around working on this thing. And we put together a proposal, and we actually created a bunch of different slides and exercises. And they got wind of it at scrum.org. And because of that, they eventually asked us. I mean, this is fast forward a few months later. And once they incorporated a lot of those changes, Dave West, who was fairly new CEO of scrum.org, kind of had this idea of the stewardship programs based on the work we were doing. And the idea is that there'd be a couple of stewards, like geographically dispersed around the world, that would be shepherding the courseware, and they would be fielding all inquiries and suggestions from other trainers in a very transparent way. And they're there to serve the other trainers. And ultimately, a year or two into that, I think it was about a year later, we said, well, what about a book? And I think it was Dave West that even brought up the idea with Ralph.
Yeah. So yeah. I was at the Scrum Day conference in London, and it was May 2016. And I was sitting down with Dave West, and we were talking about things and how the stewardship is going. And at some point, Don turns around and tells me, "You know what? I need a good a book about product ownership." And he looked at me and just said, "Okay." So this was a clear hit. Don, and just say, "Hey, Don, how about writing a book?" And Don said yes, and this is how the whole thing started. And our first plan was to be done in a year, like May 2017, so that we have something maybe actually to talk about the Agile 2017 conference. But it was a good plan. It didn't hold up.
And one of the things was when Ralph approached me with it, I said, this will be my third attempt at a book. And I said, one of the problems is that whether or not we get a publisher, not getting a publisher can sometimes take the wind out of the sails. And that's what's happened in the past. And I said, are you passionate enough about this to focus on this and even self-publish if we have to? And he said, yes. And we started without even a publisher. And it was at Agile 2017 where we were introduced to a publisher there. From Pearson, who got this thing really going, but we needed to know that we were going to do this with or without one, and that I think was the difference. And I think Ralph's energy really pushed me along on some of this stuff, and just keeping the discipline of just moving forward no matter what. We always had the sense of moving forward. It was never, we were just not doing anything for months, even though there was I had a baby during that time and. There's a lot of distractions, and Ralph's the busiest trainer in the world, actually, with scrum.org. We were still able to make progress so even if it was slow, we were always moving forward.
Yeah. So in those 2 years we have been working together, we had about 75 Skype conference calls. If you think about it, it's kind of like one every 1.5 weeks or one every 10 days, something like that. And especially during the time when Don had his baby, that we had a little bit less because there was different priorities, which is okay. It's just that at some point we talked every other day on Skype towards the end. We probably saw each other more than our spouses at home. It was a really interesting experience in that regard.
Yeah, it sounds like just a really great collaboration from two of the more experienced minds in the community about product ownership. And that's what got excited, that was exciting for me about the book. Normally I don't pre-order and I'll wait and see how reviews go. But, I think I put out on LinkedIn just last night, went ahead and snatched up a copy. So when it comes out, hopefully it's at my doorstep. So I think this is a much needed book. It's something that, I've always been a fan of Bob Galen's Scrum product ownership book, and I still think that's a really awesome reference to the role. I really love how the professionalism, though, has been put first and foremost in your guys' effort. And I'm really excited to get my hands on this book and see just what the two of you have put together.
Cool. Yeah, we're excited too. I'm nervous. I hope you guys.
Yeah,
you guys do like it. Yeah.
So we'll definitely get links to purchase the book into the show notes so that people can check it out and pre-order if they like. We'll get links to Amazon and to Pearson and all the other sites where this is available so that people can pick and choose where they'd like to get it from. At this point in the show, guys, I really leave it open to the guests to, if you want to promote your companies, any upcoming conference talks, any products, any training courses, anything like that. The floor is yours. Again, I promise to make sure that people are well aware of the book and where to buy it. But anything else, if you'd like to promote, Don, we'll start with you. And also, please add, if people would like to continue the conversation with you, how can they reach out online?
I'm passionate about this stuff. I'm always happy to talk to anyone about it. I can be found on LinkedIn pretty easily, Don McGreal. And I work for improving.com. So if you go to improving.com, you'll see there's a training area. You see a list of courses that we teach. We have offices. We're regularly doing public classes in each of our offices throughout North America. So that's Houston, Dallas, Minneapolis. We have 2 in Ohio, Cleveland and Columbus, and then also Calgary, Alberta. And I'm also, what I do a lot of is lunch and learn. So if you're in any of those areas and you'd like me or somebody else on my company to come talk to you guys for 60 to 90 minutes on a kind of a little lunch and learn or presentation, we have a whole slew of those where we're happy to do as well. And I think last time, Ryan, you had one of our coaches on there, Allison, who also works at Improving.
Yeah, Allison Pollard. She's the latest episode as of right now, and she's been on a few times, and she's amazing. So can't say enough good things about Improving and the coaches that you keep on your staff. They're wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I love the company and I love the community here at Improving.
So, Ralph, how about you? How can people continue the conversation, learn more about you and what you have going on?
Okay, so as I said, I'm originally from Germany. I got around a little bit, but right now I'm and I have my own company in Switzerland. Some company is called Effective Agile. It's a small, boutique consulting company. We have 4 employees, and we have different specializations. So my strong side is kind of Scrum, Agile, from a process management perspective. And in that regard, I give trainings. We talked about at Scrum.org for Scrum.org. But I'm also helping banks in Switzerland where we have a couple of insurance companies. Actually, I'm kicking something off with the Swiss government right now, which is also interesting. So they're also picking up on Agile. So essentially, I'm the counterpart for Don McGreal in Europe. So I'm kind of all over the place in Europe currently right now in Athens. Next week, I'm in the Netherlands and then back to Switzerland and so on. So you can reach me again also easily on LinkedIn, Ralph Jocham, Jocham, or I'm on Twitter with @Jocham. I guess you Google me, you find me, you can just ping me, and then we can have a conversation.
Well, I'll even do better than that for you, Ralph. I'll make sure that all the links you mentioned are in the show notes. So if listeners would like to reach out to either Ralph or Don, we'll make sure that all of that's readily available and possible. So guys, again, thank you for doing the show. Thanks for taking some time out of your busy days. I know the two of you are 2 of the busier trainers in the Scrum.org community, so I really appreciate this. And just want to wish you the best luck in the world with the book. And I hope you sell 1 million copies and it makes you wildly famous.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you very much. Me too, yeah.
Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate it. Have fun.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks for having us. It was great.
Oh, anytime. And I'm your host, Ryan Ripley. So I'm not going to plug or promote anything at this point because by the time this is live, it will have already passed. So I'm just going to say thanks to the audience. Really appreciate the downloads, the tweets, the notes. Every day I wake up to, or throughout the day I see just these wonderful tweets about people sharing the show, appreciating the guests, and just really love seeing that. And thank you for all of that. The downloads continue to increase. That means you're sharing the show, and that's the best way to show support to us. The more downloads, the more listeners, the more opportunities, and it means that I can get great people like Don and Ralph to join us. So really appreciate the listeners out there. If you'd like to continue the conversation with me, you can hit me up on email, ryan@ryanripley.com, on Twitter, @RyanRipley, or check out the ryanripley.com website. There's plenty of opportunities to connect, to reach out, and to collaborate. Looking forward to all of your messages there. So that's it for this week, everybody. This is Ryan Ripley saying, have a great, let's go with evening.
Thanks for listening to Agile for Humans. Let's keep the conversation going. Drop us a question on Twitter @AgileForHumans or visit agileforhumans.com.